So it's been an incredible couple of days visiting the bank, and I'm really excited about the living building idea. And I'm wondering, what our next steps are on that. Sounds like you have an incredible construction company lined up. Love to work with them. What do you see as what we should do next?
Well, I thought about it last night a bunch, and Cindy and I talked about it, and we pretty much decided we got to do it. We got to figure out a way to do it and try to make it and get the certification, the living building certification.
Fantastic.
I think it's the next level, the next level of stuff we have to do, especially after seeing that chart of where lead buildings
Right.
are, where platinum
Right.
is, and it's,
Right.
why did I spend all this money and effort doing this building when I could have done something more.
Well, this building is magnificent. I mean, to me, this building is a breakthrough in its own right, and it's just how do you keep learning, evolving, growing. And so, a living building it's a regenerative building. It's like it's giving back more than it takes. It's just that simple. And Susan and I were talking about this, and we think that even though it's one building, the way that it could connect with companies all over the region. So if it helps you have a dialogue with a wood manufacturer to help them use local wood in new ways and more sustainably sourced wood in new ways that can be engineered and go into a lot of cool new buildings, or if there's a window manufacturer locally that can start to do triple glazed windows or high performance windows. This could end up engaging 20 or 30 local companies to help them rethink their products a little bit, make them less toxic. And if they can do that, feed into this building that gets showcased, you start to have a cluster of living building product manufacturers in the region. I mean, it's part of revitalizing the whole region.
It really is, and
Yeah.
I thought of that last night too. And there's a couple of different award things that are done. One of them is called the Fast 50 Awards, which is the 50 fastest growing companies in Central Florida.
Right.
And we were honored as one of those companies. But when I was going through the list of the companies that won, not just the honorees, but the companies that won, which we were one of the companies that won, it was something like 6 out of the top 10 were construction companies.
Wow.
Or construction related.
Yeah.
And that is really the only industry in Florida. And if we could influence the input of what goes into buildings more, and there's a lot of window manufacturers
Right.
within a 100-mile radius. There's a lot of manufacturers. You met the sawmill guy last
Right.
night, and he's
Right.
just so enthusiastic
Yeah.
about this stuff. And
Yeah.
and now through his work on this building and in my other buildings, he's really gets it. He gets the local,
Right.
the sourcing
Right.
stuff locally.
And so this one building tells so many different stories. If you're able to replicate it, you mentioned maybe doing a couple of other branches that could use a similar design as the bank expands over time. It's telling so many stories. I mean, doing this at a really competitive price point, having this as a template that you can build more of these, it'll show other companies, not just in the financial sector, all sectors, that you can do a commercial living building. And it's a great statement about values, it's viable, it has basically zero operating costs, so that's a nice benefit right there.
I really like it.
I mean, it would be a breakthrough because doing it with a really lean budget would send an incredible signal that the time has come for this kind of building. I've been lucky enough to be involved with the Bullitt Center project, which is phenomenal. But the criticism has been, it's technically an amazing building, it's a beautiful building, people that work there love it, but it's an expensive building. And so we get that kind of constant critique. It's like, how could you replicate that? Is this one-off thing that a foundation did? And we've made the point, actually, it really wasn't that high of a premium, when you really look at all the operational benefits. But even so, there's a grain of truth to the critique, that we had to pay a premium to get that building done. And so to do a next generation of living building that really almost erases the premium and just takes it totally out of the equation. It's like, it's not about, are you spending 5 or 10% more? That's not the question anymore. It's, why would you ever build something that's not regenerative? I mean, why even do it any other way?
It doesn't make sense. And I felt like you were a little too apologetic about the price, because if you think about it, it's not much of a premium.
Right.
And it goes back to the whole American ethos of more, more, more.
Right.
Do you really need that imported granite countertop? No, just
Right.
take that out and put solar on
Exactly.
it.
Yeah, we've talked about redefining a Class A office building.
Right.
Redefine it away from like the marble and the prestige materials to it's Class A in terms of what it's giving back to the world.
Right, right.
And more millennials, all kinds of workers actually care about that. That's what motivates them. That's why Google and Apple are building outrageous kind of beyond platinum elite headquarters buildings, because the building cost for them is so small compared to being able to retain brilliant young workers. And those workers are only going to be in a place that, number one, is unbelievably healthy, right, in terms of air quality, natural light, the experience of nature in the building, and their access to also recreation, working out. They need all of that to be effective workers.
Yes.
So those companies see that as an absolutely essential investment just to keep their employees fulfilled and motivated. And I think that's true, for what you're doing with the bank. Having a building like this, I can tell people love to be in this building. The air quality is amazing, the views, having a living wall. Every day you walk in the lobby and you connect with nature in this wonderful, subtle way. And I can tell that helps morale for people here. So it's the same thing as you move towards a living building or other kinds of regenerative buildings. And I think for the Capital Institute, as we think about this year in the life story, it is this regenerative journey. And the building is one part of it. And I'm curious, what else has been sparked over the last couple of days. I mean, one thing that we talked about is mentoring and helping entrepreneurs move from being maybe very narrowly focused on as a social entrepreneur to being a regenerative entrepreneur, or someone who has a lot of vision, but they lack some of the basic business chops. Do you just send them away, or do you try to mentor them and connect them with resources and nurture their ideas over time? What's the role of a bank in kind of helping to nurture an entrepreneurial community?
Well, there's all this talk that banks are old tech, old school, they're going to go away, nobody's going to want to be in banking anymore, and maybe there's some truth to that for starting a new bank because the regulatory hurdles are so high now. The 7-year de novo requirement where you're under heightened scrutiny. My wife calls it the FDIC restraining order.
Right.
Who in their right mind would want to invest a bunch of money and do that? But I still think a bank, and more specifically a bank holding company, is a fantastic business delivery tool. And it's a tool that has never been used for positive, and it can be and should be. Does that mean that we're constrained by regulatory constraints in our lending? Well, sure, in the bank, but why can't there be another entity under the holding company? It's whatever, a PE fund or an angel fund,
right?
And then it all ties together.
Right.
You nurture a startup from angel and friends and family through first stage, through second stage, and then the bank steps in.
Right.
Why can't there be that whole progression? And I'm trying to really expand my thought process and boundaries of what can be accomplished, because I still think a bank holding company is a great tool for change.
Well, there's some great examples of banks that have also added advisory services. They've gotten into advising on microcredit funds all over the world. It's something that Shore Bank worked on 10 years ago before it kind of ran into the financial meltdown. But the opportunities to have multiple kinds of capital working together. So the pieces that heavily regulated bank can do, the pieces that more of a revolving loan fund can do. So in the Pacific Northwest, we have Craft 3, which is a really innovative $200 million revolving loan fund that's regulated in a much different way, but still is kind of an affiliate of a bank. And then angel funds, venture funds, it's that whole ecosystem of capital Some of it might be more mission-driven than others. And how do you weave all that together?
Well, and another example, Shorebank was a good example, and unfortunately they're not here. Another example would be to look to the European model, like Triodos.
Triodos, yeah.
But I feel strongly in my heart of hearts that the model needs to, there needs to be no apologies. There needs to be no, well, it's values-based, therefore you can expect a lower return. I'm really struggling with that. I think if it's values-based, you should still get the same return, maybe a higher return, without factoring in externalities that don't go in your wallet. I mean, it's fortunately or unfortunately, we're America. We're different. We're wired differently. Our culture's different. The European model's great, works great there, but I don't know why values funds have to be apologetic.
Right. Well, it sounds like you're demonstrating that with First Green Bank today. I mean,
trying real hard.
Yeah, I mean, I was just hearing yesterday that, because of this de novo 7-year time period, the bank's only allowed to grow at 25%. And so most banks would be thrilled to actually hit that. And you're having to deliberately only go up to 25% for regulatory reasons, but that'll be lifted, in the next couple of years, then the growth rate could be even higher. So clearly you're hitting a nerve. Mm-hmm. Depositors are really excited about the bank, and I assume part of that's because of the values-driven story. And so you've got plenty of deposits moving towards the bank, and that means you have a lot of opportunity to then deploy loans through this green lens.
Well, February 19, 2016 is when we come out of it.
Not that you're counting days or anything.
But I also think that with the values proposition that we have, we're not going to loan to a slash and burn residential sprawl developer.
Right.
That was the first stuff that melted down in the last meltdown. I really think if there's another economic downturn, we're going to be stronger and better able to weather the storm because of the values proposition. We won't loan to an extractive industry. We have a do not touch list.
Right.
It's not just influencing and educating potential customers. It's who we just won't mess with. And it's a slippery slope. I mean, do you loan to a fast food franchisee and know that they're killing every one of their customers slowly? Well, the answer would probably be no. But what if they put solar on the roof? Right. So it's always a state of flux.
Right. Well, and we think of it as a journey. The journey to being regenerative never ends by definition. That's what's so amazing about it. Because yes, you can put solar on, say, a fast food restaurant, and then you realize, oh, we're doing some incredible things. It could even be a net zero franchise.
Right.
Fantastic. But then you realize, why don't we source organic ingredients? Well, okay, it's expensive, but you work it through, and it's like, okay, maybe by the time you really work out the price point, yes, it goes up some, but you're still going to have plenty of customers, and you have an even better value story because it's truly healthy food now,
right.
And you've got new connections, ideally, with the regional agricultural system. In Portland, one of my good friends runs Hot Lips Pizza. So David Yudkin comes from a long line of pizza makers in Brooklyn, and he took all the really good recipes out to Portland and said, oh, well, now that I'm in Portland, I can get amazing grain within 200 miles. World-class, dairy, amazing meats right there. And so he's added organic seasonal produce to that. So the pizza's changing all the time. So when you go into Hot Lips Pizza, you never really know, like this week, what is it going to be? And maybe it's morel mushrooms, one week, and it's leeks the next, and arugula the next. You just never know, and it's always awesome. And so that regenerative journey, you just keep cycling to the next level, and asking the next strategic question. Great, we're healthier than we were. We're doing more than we were. We found a business model that still works. What's next? It's like,
Yeah. So therefore, don't reject the seemingly obvious. And there's another. We're talking about banks and different angles and ways to look at things. Another amazing bank is Sunrise Bank David Reiling. It's in Minnesota, and he's a living example, perfect example of being able to make returns that are out the roof higher than peer, but be deeply values based. And it's a lot of it's in the social equity space, but it can be done. You know, it's a model where it can be done.
Fantastic. So what are the big challenges over the next year or two that you see for First Green Bank?
Well, the perpetual challenge we have is capital, and I'm a proponent of regulation. I think especially the financial services industry needs to be heavily regulated, and there's strict requirements for capital to assets, and we are growing at a rate that we always need additional capital. We're growing faster than we can earn the capital. So I'm going to be pretty soon faced with yet another capital raise.
Right.
And then the other pressures are the pressures to sell, shareholder pressure to sell, and the market's starting to heat up again.
Right.
You guys aren't in Florida, probably don't follow the Florida M&A activity, but multiples are going back up. Everyone was saying, oh, you'll never see 4 times book again, and maybe not, but we're rapidly approaching 2 times book now, and who knows in the next 6 months or whatever. So
right.
I see those as the 2 biggest challenges.
Right. So it sounds like having investors that are in alignment with the regenerative journey for the bank will be critical. You know, identifying those investors, educating them, working with them over time, and working with the exit questions. You know,
right.
Investors that maybe want to get out within a few years. How do you balance all of that? And it sounds like you'd like to keep the bank independent for at least a very long time. Is that your hope?
It's the whole Maslow's hierarchy of needs thing. It's very fulfilling to me I feel like I'm at the pinnacle and doing good things. I also have the reality that I have an obligation to the investors. I have an obligation, not only fiduciary, but a moral obligation. The only real way for investors to make money in a community bank is the exit.
Right.
And I don't know if I told you or not, but I have dinner with my parents every Sunday. Our families get together with my sister. And my dad sits at the head of the table where he's always sat. And a few Sundays ago, he looked at me and he says, Kenny, you think I'm going to live long enough to get any value out of that bank stock? And so, you know, it kind of really puts it in perspective.
Right.
It can't be a
right.
forever thing. Not this one.
Right.
You know, what's my hat trick? What do I do next? I'm not sure.
Right. Right.
So, you know.
Does the bank currently pay dividends?
No.
Yeah.
It doesn't because of that capital.
Yeah.
We need to retain it and roll it back.
Right.
In.
Right. Exactly.
The dividend thing's a real challenge. If you start, you can't ever stop.
Yeah.
The investors expect it.
Right.
I don't know. It's a conundrum.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Well, on this question of setting investor expectations, there's one really inspiring story I wanted to share. EcoTrust is a very innovative nonprofit in Portland, and I've worked with them extensively around ecological forestry funds. And the key question there is exactly what's the investor exit strategy? What's the timeline? And right now, there's been a huge switch in forest land ownership from big integrated companies like a Weyerhaeuser that used to own all of their own forest land as well as manage operations, cut the wood, own the sawmills, market it. I mean, totally integrated. That's going away. For arcane tax reasons, largely, most of those companies don't want to hold the land anymore. It's more efficient to have almost like a REIT type structure, almost like a real estate investment trust for forest land. And those vehicles are called forest management funds. They're getting billions and billions of dollars in new investment. And their strategy has basically been, look, it's 10-year exit. We're going to basically harvest at just the right time. We'll try to time the market, basically cut everything that we own, sell it for top dollar, and then we'll flip the land, you know, towards the end of the 10-year period. We'll just sell it for what we can. And we're going to deliver 10, 12% returns during that period. And that's literally what they're saying in the investment prospectus. It is just the opposite of a regenerative view. They're literally just saying, yeah, we're just going to try to time the market, just cut it when we can get top dollar, and we'll sell it for whatever we can. That's our model. So EcoTrust has a little bit different model, which is we want to maintain this land in perpetuity. It is an open-ended fund. There is no defined exit, and we're going to restore the land. We're going to transition it to FSC certified, really well managed. We'll have additional returns from managing carbon credits, ecosystem services, sales, that sort of thing. And they've been very successful with those funds. So they have about 300 million now in various forest land funds that are totally open-ended. However, because some investors need to get out, even though there's no defined point at which you can leave, the fund does allow the different investors to basically buy each other out in carefully circumscribed ways. So they turned that need for an exit into an incredible story because there's a tribe, the Coquille tribe in Oregon, that was able to acquire the funds to buy out some of the existing investors that, their time had come. They really wanted out.
Mm-hmm.
And so the tribe was able to purchase a 5,000 acre parcel of very significant land from a cultural perspective. It's really the heart of the Coquille tribe's traditional territory.
Mm-hmm.
So the tribe was able to acquire that land. EcoTrust used the proceeds to very strategically buy out just the key in that moment. And it became this amazing story of really holding that land so the tribe had enough time to build the funds to acquire it. And then they were able to take that money and buy out those key investors. So I think there's almost a regenerative model of how you think about investors too. And I know RSF Foundation has done very interesting things because they've also created loan funds like this with sometimes dozens of very small note holders. And each year they kind of have a process where they say, hey, who really needs out this year?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe a family, has $25,000 in notes for a Waldorf school. And the family says, we really would like to get out for whatever reason. And they talk to the other note holders, and someone steps forward and says, great, I'd like to take on more notes. So it becomes a conversation, and part of that story that the investors are going through their own life cycles and their own regenerative journeys, and it's a conversation about kind of who most needs what year by year.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, a similar example would be the Sapphire Fund that the Global Alliance for Banking on Values put together that invests in values-based financial institutions. And it's a very similar structure. It's a mutual fund, and there's going to be periodic times where investors can get out, but it's really a more long view kind of thing.
Right.
Within the fund, they expect returns of X percentage from earnings from the investee companies, but they also expect that some of the banks are going to sell and they'll have the big pop or whatever.
Right.
That could potentially be a source of my next capital need.
Right.
It would be a larger chunk than any of my current shareholders, but at least it's values aligned.
Right.
So I wouldn't have that problem, I don't think.
Right.